Hey there! So a couple of weeks back, I launched my new web-based game called JigglePix, and the response wasn't exactly what I'd hoped for. Watch the rest of this video to find out what happened, what I'm up to now, and along the way, we'll talk about another game which you might have heard of called Wordle. So 2 weeks ago, it was the big launch of JigglePix. Everything was set up for the big day, big event, posted on all the forums, voting to get it to the top of Product Hunt, top of Hacker News, Tech News, gaming websites. I'm just kidding. It was a really low-key event. This is just like a tiny, small prototype made just by me. And I was after the kind of feedback that I would get by sharing it with a handful of people within a company, if I worked within a company. Since I don't, I reached out to some friends, some family, and I made this YouTube video that you might have seen encouraging people to use it. In the end, I got close to 10 people probably to actually try it. And some others gave me some feedback too. So this initial feedback that I got from people can be roughly categorized into 3 buckets. One was people who tried it, but it didn't work. This was partly due to a bug with importing from their Google Photos library, and partly that some people didn't have enough photos in their Google Photo library for it to work. The second was people who didn't want to link it to their Google Photos library because they were worried about the permissions that would give the app and myself to see their entire library. And the third was people who did try it and left some kind of positive feedback like, oh, that was pretty cool, or nice idea, that was fun. A couple said it was too easy and a couple said it was too difficult, but it was kind of just some bland positive feedback. So looking at these 3 categories of feedback, the first one I'm not super worried about. I can fix the bugs. I can add more customization options to work with more people's Google Photos libraries. That one seems addressable. The second one of people who are concerned about giving the app permission to see their Google Photos library, that feels more serious. It feels like the way it works right now, there's going to be a bunch of users who are just never going to want to use it for that reason. And the third one, I don't think it says that much, honestly. The people give you some kind of bland sounding positive feedback. A lot of people just do that to make you feel good. I mean, when you ask people for feedback on a new project, sometimes you put them in an awkward position where they don't want to say anything bad. If it doesn't blow them away, they're probably not going to say that. They'll just give you some bland feedback like pretty cool, which is what I got. It doesn't say much one way or the other. I think the key thing is to look not at what people say, but at what people do. And from this point of view, things didn't go that well. So the people who used it once and then didn't come back. Now this is not good. This shows that the idea in its current form isn't really there. So one person who actually does like using the app and does want to come back to it is my 6-year-old daughter. So that is like a glimmer of hope on the horizon. Apart from her, the person who's used it the most is me. And I have like a critical assessment of the early prototype, which boils down to 4 points. So the first thing is that it didn't feel game-like enough, meaning that each session kind of ended exactly the same, no matter how quickly you did it, no matter how many mistakes you made. So there wasn't enough of a sense of achieving mastery at something and getting rewarded for that. The second point was that there wasn't anything compelling to get you to come back the next day to do it. 3 is a lack of a social element. Even in the weakest form of like even a completely single player game, typically you can talk about it with a friend and say, oh, do you remember that part at the end of level 2? In JigglePix, because it's completely customized using your photos from your Google Photos library, everyone's experience is different. And if one person reaches 30 stars and another person reaches 30 stars, they've done completely different photos to get there. So there's not much to talk about. So I feel like it's missing some kind of social element that other games may have. And 4 is that often the experience in a session could be bad if the photos themselves were bad. And this first version, this first prototype didn't do any work to try to pick the good photos. It picked a semi-random selection of photos. And so sometimes you'd get ones that were really blurry or just uninteresting. And so they would spoil the experience a little bit. So clearly there was a bunch of stuff to be done to improve this. I had ideas to improve it, but I'll be honest that my motivation was starting to lag. Okay, I could work on trying to address all these points, but maybe it will be months more of work. Like, I wasn't convinced enough with my ideas to get me really pumped about continuing to work on it. So my mindset shifted into like, okay, let's just like get this approved by Google, put some polishing, finishing touches on it, and get it out there, and then move on to something else. And then, you know, see what the response is. I can check back in a couple of months. If more people have used it and I've got more feedback, I can reassess then. That was where my head was at. And so I applied to Google. Google refused to validate it because they said it looked like it was still in development, which I thought was a weird response. It's like, yeah, no shit. Most apps that you use are still in development well after they're launched. That's a good thing, right? That they continue to evolve and improve and get made better. I think they were objecting to the fact that it just looked a bit unpolished and had the word beta on the landing page. So it was fair enough. It wasn't ready for the prime time in Google's eyes. And so now I was thinking, okay, I could polish this, but got me thinking, well, wait a minute. Do I even need Google anyway? The reason I linked to Google Photos in the first place was because I thought it would provide a more frictionless way to populate the game tree with content from your Google Photos library. But it turns out that this link with Google is actually causing a bunch of problems, like some people worried about privacy. Just grabbing a bunch of photos automatically was pulling in some bad quality photos, so the users would need to filter them anyway to provide a great experience. It got me thinking, do I really need Google? And then this sparked like an idea for a whole new way that this could work. A bit closer to my original intention when I came up with the idea in the first place, actually. So before I talk about my new version of JigglePix, let me take a slight detour to talk about a game you might have heard of called Wordle. Now, Wordle got very popular a few months back. It's made by one guy, just a simple static HTML and JavaScript web page that he ended up selling to the New York Times for multiple millions of dollars. It's an awesome story. So I think the Wordle does things well, which address all the problems that I enumerated earlier with JigglePix. The first one was that it wasn't game-like enough and didn't reward you for developing mastery. Now, Wordle, the more you use it, you come up with little tips and strategies, and people share them for how to play the game better and make it more likely that you get an answer within a few guesses. People have even written computer programs to try to solve it in the optimal way possible. So there's a huge rabbit hole that people have gone down with tips and strategies for playing Wordle. So number two is there's no reason to come back every day. Now, Wordle solves this brilliantly. There's exactly one puzzle every day. So you can't get burned out on it on a specific day because there's only one. So if you want to do more, you have to wait until the next day to come back, and then you get a new puzzle. Perfect. Number three, no social element. Now with Wordle, it's not a typically social game where you interact with people within the game, but because everyone on a specific day is doing the same puzzle, there's something they can talk about with one another. They can ask, oh, did you do today's Wordle? And you can compare how many tries it took you to get to the same word. People do this on Twitter, and it adds a social element to the game. And then my fourth problem with JigglePix was that some of the photos were bad. This doesn't map exactly to Wordle. The content for Wordle is not photos, it's words that you're trying to guess. It's an easier problem in their case. They just put a few thousand high-frequency words to use as things to guess. That one's not as applicable. But I think the top three complaints I had with JigglePix, Wordle does a really good job addressing those. Well, this leads me into my new version of JigglePix, which you could say is somewhat Wordle inspired. So the first problem, not game-like enough. My way of dealing with this is to give people a star if they complete one photo without making any bad moves. And the second way is to have a timer in the session to encourage people to do it more quickly. So you're encouraging people to do it both without mistakes and more quickly. Now, the second problem of like, why would they come back every day? Let's just do exactly like Wordle does. Let's just say you're only allowed to do one set of photos per day. Now, I could allow you to repeat that set of photos. Undecided about that yet. But the key is, if you want a new set of photos, you have to wait till the next day. So hopefully you don't get burned out on one day. You have to wait till the next day to do it again. It sets up a daily habit, almost exactly like Wordle. So the third point is the lack of a social aspect. And the way I want to address this is to have groups, either public or private groups, within JigglePix, where like a group of friends will all be doing the same photos that day. A group of family members, likewise, could all be doing the same pictures that day. And then this gives them something to talk about and also to compare, like, oh, how many did you get perfect? Or how many stars did you get? Or how long did it take you to do it? And at the end of the session, there could be a high score table, allowing people to see that, to see like, how long did it take Grandad to do this particular puzzle, for instance? And then the fourth problem of there being bad photos automatically pulled from Google Photos is just like to scrap Google Photos completely and just make it so that one person who sets up the group is in charge of uploading a bunch of photos. So if we make it so that you do 5 photos per day, that means if they upload, say, 50 photos, then that's enough to run this for 10 days. So the idea is people will have to keep uploading photos. It could be that anyone in the group is allowed to upload photos to this group. So I had this idea on Friday morning last week. I got a bit excited about it and scrapped what I was planning to work on and started hacking away. And I even carved out a few hours on Saturday and Sunday morning to work on this, which I don't normally do, but I was kind of excited to get something ready to be able to share with my family, to give this a shot. Now, this new version doesn't use any of the code I wrote for Google Photos, or the home page, or the season page, or the whole concept of splitting your photos into seasons. So there's a ton of code that I would potentially throw away if I went this direction. In the end, I managed to get a version which works on Sunday, and I shared it with my family, and the feedback was way better than in the earlier version. People really seem to like it. They seem to like being able to compare their score with other people, seeing it was a bit social, and they would see the other people that had used it that day. And I got a bunch of requests for changes and improvements. So I'm cautiously optimistic about this new direction and a bit re-energized about the project. I've got a lot of ideas to improve this. It does mean that JigglePix isn't available for people outside of this little private family group I've got right now. In the very short term, my plan is just to keep iterating on it just within this group that my family's using. But then if people actually come back every day and it actually seems to show more promise, what I'll do is allow the ability to make more groups and then open it up to more people. So I'm not sure exactly what lessons you could draw from this, but it does make me think of two things. One is the sunk cost fallacy, which is just because you've invested a lot of time going in one direction, that shouldn't make you feel completely committed to continuing in that direction. You should just try to objectively determine how valuable is this thing you're making, regardless of how much work it took to make it, and then make the decision of, do you stick with that or do you pivot to something else? The flip side of this is that new ideas are fragile, and the first version of anything is very likely not to work. And it can make sense not to give up on it at the first sign that it's not working. It can take a few iterations before the idea really shows its value. So there's no easy answer here. I think you have to just find the right balance between these two opposing viewpoints of, oh, there's the sunk cost fallacy. On the flip side, new ideas are fragile. So maybe don't give up on a new idea just because the first crappy prototype isn't a big success. Like most things in engineering, in products, in life, it's a question of compromise and finding the right balance between these things. I hope that was somewhat useful, and if you want to continue following me on this journey, please give the video a like and a subscribe to let me know if it's worth me carrying on doing these. I hope to see you again in a couple of weeks with another update. Bye bye.